Now we'll continue from this. Means if I say software testing or system testing, right? Again, it has been categorized into two types. Again, it has been categorized into two types. One is nothing but what we are actually calling it as in functional testing. And the second one is nothing but what we are actually calling it as a non-functional testing. Okay, first one is nothing but what we are actually calling it as a functional testing, and second one is nothing but what we are actually calling it as a non-functional testing. So if I am going to test functionalities of my application, if I am going to test functionalities of my application, we say it as a functional testing. If I am going to test the non-functionalities of my application, we say it as a non-functional testing. So whenever you see any application, so whenever you see any software application, whenever you see any software application, whenever you see any software application, it has three layers. Okay, it has three layers. Okay, it has three layers. So what are those three layers? So first layer is nothing but what we are actually calling it as in presentation layer. Second layer is nothing but what we are actually calling it as in business layer. Third layer is nothing but what we are actually calling it as in data layer. So these layers are also called as UI, means which is nothing but user interface, which is nothing but user interface. And this layer is also called as API, means application programming interface, application programming interface. And last layer is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an DB layer, which we are actually calling it as an database, which we actually call it as an database. So whenever you see any software application, right, it has been categorized majorly into these three layers. One is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an presentation layer, okay, business layer, and as well as data layer. So whenever you are going to perform functional testing of an application, if I'm able to test my application from UI, from API, and as well as DB, means if I'm testing functionalities of that particular application from all these three layers like UI, API, and as well as DB, we say that I had done functional testing of that particular application. We had done functional testing of that particular application. If you see a non-functional testing, right, means it is like where we are going to test non-functionalities of that particular application. Means what I mean to say here is, if I want to test compatibility, okay, if I want to test compatibility of my application, or else if I want to perform security testing of my application, or else if I want to perform multi-language testing, means where we actually test with multiple languages, or else if I want to test performance, okay, or else if I want to test performance of that particular application, okay, if I want to test performance of that particular application. So in this way, right, we have different types which comes under to non-functional testing, which comes under to non-functional testing. So in our current session, right, we are going to drive this software testing functional part. Means in our current sessions, right, you are learning, means whenever you are going to choose your career as a software tester, whenever you are going to choose your career as a software tester, we need to choose your career whether you are going to come towards functional testing or whether you are going to build your career in non-functional testing, whether you are going to build your career into non-functional testing, because both has different teams who are actually involved to perform testing functionally and as well as non-functionally. So the current sessions, right, that what we are driving, the current sessions, right, what we are done driving under to this software testing, under to this particular software testing is you are going to learn functional testing of your application. You are going to learn functional testing of application. So as I said you right, if I need to perform functional testing, I need to test from all these three perspectives. Means if I test all these three layers of my application, means from UI, API, and as well as DB, right? Then only I can claim myself that I had functionally tested that particular application. Then only I can claim myself that I had functionally tested that my application. So here, right, if you see these three, right, means as I said, right, under to functional testing, again, you need to perform UI, means you can test from UI, you can test from API, you can test from DB, you need to test from database. So under to this UI, API, and as well as DB, right, means under to these layers, right, again, I can perform testing in two ways. Again, I can perform testing in two ways. What are those two ways? Is one way is I can means again I can perform testing in two ways. One way is I can manually test it, or else I can automate it. Or else I can automate it. If I need to put it very simple, right? See, normally we are saying that functional testing. Okay, normally we say that functional testing. Under to this, right, we have UI, API, and as well as DB. So UI, from UI, right, I can also manually test my application, or else I can automate it. Or else I can automate it. In the similar way, right, from API as well, I can manually test my application, and as well as I can automate it. If I from the DB level also, right, I can manually test it, and as well as I can also automate and test it. So if you see, right, functional testing. Okay, if you see, right, functional testing. Okay, if you see, right, functional testing. Okay, if you see the functional testing, right, means if I am going to test my application from all these three layers, means I need to test it from UI, API, and as well as DB, right? We actually say I had functionally tested that particular application. And if I need to perform functional testing, right, I can again under to each and every layer, right, I can manually test it, and as well as I can automate, or else I can automate and I can test it. So if I need to manually test, okay, if I need to manually test my application, okay, if I need to manually test my application, you need to understand the methodologies and the process of flow. And the process flow. If I need to automate and if I need to test it, you need to learn some automation tools. You need to learn some automation tools. Okay. And now, and now if you see, right, if I need to manually test that particular application, I need to learn the methodologies and process flow. I need to learn the methodologies and process flow. If I need to automate and test it, right, I need to learn automation tools. I need to learn automation tools. So if I say methodology, right, if I say methodology or process, right, again, we have different types of methodologies or the processes which are used in your real practice, Okay, we will see that. It means we will see that what are different methodologies or processes which are used in your real practices in your projects. And if I am going to learn automation tools, right, we have a lot of tools. It means you can learn Selenium with Java or Selenium with Python. Okay, you have a tool called Playwright, RIGHT Playwright, or also you also have a tool called Cypress. Okay, you all means there are a lot of tools in the market which actually helps us to automate your application and test it. You can also automate your application and you can test it. It means you can automate it using that particular tool and you can perform automation testing on it. So in our current session, right, means we actually see, means once we had done with our manual process, we will schedule separate batches for Selenium with Java, Selenium with Python, Selenium with for Cypress, and as well as Playwright. So whoever is interested in learning whatever the tool, right, they can also join those sessions. But initially, right, the first thing is the first part of your software testing, right? You need to understand how you are going to manually test an application. You need to understand how you are going to manually test an application. And see, normally, right, whenever you see, right, the QA who is actually the QA who is actually responsible for performing software testing was called with different names. Like some say it as an tester, some say it as an QA, some say it as an SDET. Okay, so SDET, which is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an software development engineer test. Okay, we see this terminology in your recent what you know means in your recent time period. You see QA was called as SDETs. So you need to understand initially, right? We used to have separate resources to perform manual testing, and to perform automation testing. So the resource who is actually responsible for performing manual testing, right? We actually call it as an QA, or we actually call it as an software tester, or else we actually call it as an software tester. But a resource who is actually responsible for both manual and automation testing means we don't, as of now, right? We don't have separate resources to perform manual and as well as separate resource for performing automation testing. The resource who is actually recruited for testing, right? He should work on both manual and as well as automation testing. If a resource who is actually capable to do both manual and automation testing, right? He was called as SDET. He was called as SDET, Software Development Engineer Test. He was called as SDET, Software Development Engineer Test. And as I said, you right, if I want to means as a first step, right, if I want to learn software testing, you need to understand how you are going to first manually, how you are going to first perform testing, means how you are going to perform software testing manually. Okay, so if I need to perform software testing manually, right, first you need to understand, a little bit on the processes and the methodologies, that are followed, in your development, or else in your software development. So as I said, you right, if I need to develop any software application, we actually follow a process. That process is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an SDLC. That process is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an SDLC, Software Development Life Cycle. This is also called as a methodology. Okay, people say what methodology that you are following, means you should explain them that what process that you are following as part of your development. Okay, if they say right what methodology that we are following, means it means that you need to explain them that what process you are followed in that particular application development. So in this, right, again, these processes are the SDLC, Software Development Life Cycle, right? Again, it has been categorized into three types. The first type is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an old or legacy methodology. Second type is nothing but new methodology. Third type is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an advanced methodologies. And under to each and every type, right, we have different we have different models. Like the first model under to old methodology is nothing but what we actually calling it as an waterfall model. The second model is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an prototype model. The third model is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an RAD model, Rapid Application Development Model. The next model is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an incremental model. The next model is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an spiral model. So these are the methodologies. Means these are nothing but different methodologies that are available under two old or legacy methodologies. And under two new methodologies, right, we have fish model. and we also have V model. These two comes under two new methodologies. These two comes under two new methodologies. And under two advanced we say agile. Okay, under two advanced we say agile, and we have lot of flavors under two. We have lot of flavors under two agile. Like we see what agile XP, we say agile Scrum. Okay, we say agile Scrum. Okay, and we say agile safe methodology. We have lot of flavors under to agile, which will be used by different organizations. But you need to understand the brace process of each and every methodology. So this is nothing but whenever I need to develop a software application, I need to follow a process. That process is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an SDLC, means software development life cycle. And in that particular right, again that process has been categorized into three types: old, new, and as well as advanced. Under two old we have few methodologies. Under two new we have two methodologies. Under two advanced again we have agile flavors, means agile methodology and its flavors like agile XP, Scrum, and as well as safe methodology. So first you need to understand. Okay, so first you need to understand. First you need to understand what we actually see in our real practice, means which methodologies that we actually see in our real practices. So you majorly see V model, and as well as you majorly see max number of organizations follow agile methodology for their development. You majorly see these two methodologies. One is V model and second one is agile methodology. Maximum number of organizations uses agile methodology. If there are any organizations where there are projects which are derived more than 10 years, right? They may actually follow V methodology for their development. They may actually follow V methodology for their development. So you need to understand both these methodologies. These two are very important. And you should also understand, as I said you right, we are saying these methodologies. Okay, we are saying these methodologies or processes. You need to understand that what difference that you see between old, new, and as well as advanced methodology. So to understand that, right, first we'll start with the waterfall model. As I said you right, if I say waterfall model means it is also an SDLC process, means software development life cycle process. It is also a software development life cycle process. Means it also has some stages. So first stage is nothing but what we are actually calling it as requirements gathering. Second stage is nothing but analysis. Third stage is nothing but design. Fourth stage is nothing but coding. Fifth stage is nothing but testing. And the sixth stage is nothing but release. And the last stage is nothing but maintenance. So if you see, right, if I need to understand this waterfall model, right, it is an incremental approach. Means it is like an incremental approach. Means these stages, right? First, they will do requirements gathering, and once this stage has been completed, then they start with analysis. And once this stage has been completed, then they'll start with the design. And once the design stage has been completed, then they'll start with coding. And once the coding or development has been done, then they will actually start with the testing. And once the testing has been completed, then they will start with release. And once the release has been completed, then they will start with maintenance. Okay, then they will start with maintenance. See, very simple. So first, let us we say, right. Normally, we say a software project and as well as a software product. Okay, software product. So here, right, as I said you right, if you are following in a traditional approach, okay, we have two approaches. One is nothing but traditional, and second one is agile. Okay, whenever you are following a traditional approach, means it is like a V model or the old methodologies or the new methodologies, right? We have different resources involved into these particular stages. We have different resources who are involved into these particular stages. If you are working in Agile, right, again, we have different resources who are actually involved into these particular stages. So you need to understand which resource, which resource is involved in each and every stage. Which resource is involved in each and every stage. So if you see requirements gathering, right, here we have business analyst. Here we have business analyst who is actually responsible for collecting, means for collecting requirements, from client, who is actually responsible for collecting requirements from client. Means first stage, right? Means first stage is nothing but requirements gathering. In this particular stage, right, we have a resource which called business analyst. He is actually responsible for collecting requirements from client. He is actually responsible for collecting requirements from client. And now the second, right, analysis. Analysis means here we have a resource called system analysis, system analyst. Okay, he is actually responsible for performing analysis on the collected requirements. Performing analysis on the collected requirements. So it is very simple. What we actually do under to requirement gathering means here, right, actually business analyst will collect what needs to be get developed. What needs to be get developed as part of that particular software application. And system analyst will perform analysis on the collected requirements. So here, right, he is going to identify that how that particular requirement needs to be get developed as a software application. He is going to do analysis that how the requirement that has been provided by business analyst will be converted in the form of a software application. So for that, right, he actually do a analysis that how it can be converted into an how it can be embedded, how it can be added to your software application to achieve that particular requirement. That is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an analysis. Now third part, right, design. We have a technical architect who is actually responsible for for converting, okay, for converting the analyzed requirement into diagrammatic representation, okay, means normally, right, whatever the requirement that has been collected by business analyst, it will be analyzed and documented by system analyst that how it needs to be implemented in our software application. Now, based upon once that requirement got analyzed, then a design technical architect is responsible for converting that requirement into diagrammatic representation. You have different languages like you have UML, means unified modified language, unified model language, or else you also have wireframes, you also have mockups through which you can convert through which you can convert your requirement into diagrammatic representation, I'll show you, some sample wireframes and mockups that how a requirement can be shown in a diagrammatic representation. Okay, so the next part, once the technical architect has converted that requirement into diagrammatic representation, then the coding will be done by developer. Okay, what will be the output of this particular coding is build. What would be the output? We'll see the outputs later. So developer is the resource who is actually involved in coding part. And here under to testing, right, we say QA or we say SDET are involved under to that particular testing part. And in release, right, we have DevOps team who is actually responsible for deployment. What do you mean by deployment? Deployment means the code is copied to that particular server. Means, for example, if I need to access that application, right, the code that was developed by developer should be copied to a server. Okay, and that server right from so that everybody can access that particular application. So the code that is copied to that particular server is nothing but what we are actually calling it as an deployment. This was done by DevOps team. This was done by DevOps team, where you have SREs, software reliability engineers. They are called as SREs. SREs means site reliability engineers. SREs means site reliability engineers. Okay, under to DevOps team, right? You have SREs, means site reliability engineers, who are actually responsible for these deployments. And finally, maintenance. Maintenance, right? Again, it contains developers and as well as QAs, which are called as a CCB team. Which are called as a CCB team, means change control board. Which are called as a CCB team, which is nothing but what we are actually calling it as a change control board, or else we can also call as a support engineering team. Support engineering team. We can also call it as an support engineering team. Okay, we can also call it as an support engineering team. So whenever you see, right, whenever you see an SDLC, right, it has multiple stages, and in each and every stage there is a resource who is actually involved to perform that particular stage. Like if you see requirement gathering, right, business analyst is the one who actually collect requirements from client or product. Okay, or business means, if you see, right, in the if it is a project, right, we have clients. If it is a product, right, we need to actually collect it from the business. And system analyst is the one who actually perform analysis of the collected requirements. Now, what difference that you see between requirement gathering and analysis? Requirement gathering will list out what needs to be get developed. Analysis will help us that how it needs to be get developed. And the technical architect is responsible for converting the analyzed requirements into diagrammatic representation. And technical architect is responsible for converting the analyzed requirements into diagrammatic representation. And finally, coding. Coding is done by developer, testing is done by SDAT or QA, and release is done by DevOps. And finally, once the product got released to production, we actually do maintenance. Maintenance is done by QA or CCB. Maintenance is done by CCB team, or you can also call it as a support engineering team, where we also have developers and QA involved into that particular team, where you will also see developer and as well as QA is involved into that particular team, where you see developer and as well as QA involved into that particular team. So this is nothing but if you see, right, means we have different stages, and we had seen which resource is responsible for each and every stage. Which resource is responsible for each and every stage. Now you need to understand in each and every stage, right, what is the outcome? Okay, what is the outcome of our each and every stage? Means what is, you can simply say what would be the outcome, or else you can simply say what would be the what artifacts that you get as outcome, or else what are the results of each and every stage. What would be the results of each and every stage? So if you see here, right, means whenever you say, right, SDLC model, any model, whether it can be old, new, or advanced, it has the same set of stages. So if you see, right, as I said, right here, business analyst is responsible for collecting requirements from client, and he is actually going to prepare a document with a name called BRS, Business Requirement Specification. He is actually going to draft all these requirements under to a document called Business Requirement Specification. He is actually going to prepare a document called Business Requirement Specification document. How this a document looks, right? I'll show you an example. Okay, but as of now, right, just to remember, business analyst is responsible for collecting requirements from client or business. and he actually prepares a document with name called BRS, Business Requirement Specification Document. Now the second part is analysis. Now once the requirements has been collected by VA, now system analyst is responsible for analyzing it. System analyst is responsible for analyzing those requirements, and he is going to prepare a document, with a name called SRS, Software Requirement Specification Document. And he is going to prepare a document called SRS, Software Requirement Specification Document, or else you can simply say System Requirement Specification Document. Here we call it as a Business Requirement Specification Document. Here we say Software or System Requirement Specification Document. Now under to design, here we have technical architect. He is actually responsible for generating documents where you have diagrammatic representation of that particular requirement, and those documents are HLDs and LLDs. HLD means high level design document, LLD means low level design documents. Means the third part is in design, right? Technical architect is responsible for converting that requirement into diagrammatic representation, and that representation will be shown as high level design and as well as low level design documents. Means he is going to convert that requirement into diagrammatic representation, and to show that diagrammatic representation, right? Okay, if I need to show that diagrammatic representation, right? So that diagrammatic representations are categorized into two: high level design document and as well as low level design document. So technical architect is responsible for converting a requirement into diagrammatic representation into high level design and as well as low level design documents. High level design and as well as low level design document. And once this technical architect has completed this, right, by seeing this diagrammatic representation, here developer is responsible for providing a build. Means whatever the code that is written by the developer, right, he is going to combine everything under to a single package. What we are actually calling it as an build. Build means it is nothing but you are grouping the complete code under to a single package, is nothing but what we are actually calling it as a build. And once the developer has provided that particular build, right, now tester is going to test that particular application using testing artifacts. What do you mean by testing artifacts? Means supportive documents to perform testing. What do you mean by artifacts? Means supportive documents to perform testing. And once testing has been done, right, then it will be released by the DevOps team to the higher environment, Means if I say DevOps, right, they are responsible for deployment. They are actually responsible for deploying the build to higher environments. We will talk a little bit more on environments in our upcoming sessions. Okay, we need to also understand what are environments. So DevOps is responsible for deploying code. To higher environments. And once that code got deployed, right, then we are going to do maintenance. Maintenance means if you see any issues or any change requests that you see from client when they are using their application in production, when they are using that application in production. Means if I say production means live environment. See, for example, if I want to access google.com site, right, how do you access it? We actually say google.com, right? So this is your live environment, which is nothing but what we are actually calling it as a production. So when I was using this application, right, if I see any issues or if I need any improvements or if I need any changes, right, that will be taken care by the maintenance team. That will be taken care by the maintenance team. So now if you see here, right, means requirements gathering means business analyst is responsible for collecting requirements from client and he is going to prepare a document called BRS, Business Requirement Specification Document. And second, analysis. System analyst is responsible for performing analysis and he is going to prepare a document called SRS. He is going to prepare a document called SRS, System Requirement Specification Document. And third, technical architect is responsible for converting your requirement into diagrammatic representation and he is going to prepare a document called HLD and LLD, high level design and as well as low level design documents. And coding is done by a developer. He is responsible for providing a build. Build means a package where he is going to bind all his code into a single folder. A package where he is going to bind all his code into a single folder. And the last one and next one is testing. Testing, right, is going to test whether that requirement is properly working on our application. Testing, right, they are going to test whether that particular functionality or requirement is properly working on our application. Release means DevOps team is responsible for release. They actually do deployments into higher environments. And the last one is nothing but